Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the podcast. This week, I wanted to interview Adam from My Salisbury. He's creating a new community, news network, and he's had some interesting things happen since this podcast was filmed. But I wanted to share that interview with you. I hope you guys really do enjoy it. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. And if you'd like to take part in anything that Adam is doing, then I'll leave his links in the description down below. But thank you so much for coming back once again this week. I'll see you very, very soon.
Okay, so my name's Andy Murrs, and I founded a community project called My Salisbury. Do you want me to go further in that, or
let's talk about My Salisbury a little bit. I think that's the natural progression to that, because I think most people will be asking, okay, cool, what is My Salisbury?
Okay, so My Salisbury is a multimedia news and media platform, and behind that is a community project which aim is to provide people with new skills and a platform to share their interests and other things that they are passionate about in Salisbury. So it could be anything from a community group they're involved with, an event that they're running, or anything that's happening in Salisbury that they think might be of interest. So our aim is to teach these people new skills around media and journalism, from the very basics of media law to the more complex things of how to run an interview, how to write an article, how to edit video, how to shoot an interview, do the lighting for it, everything that you can imagine that goes into making a short form piece of content for either news or documentary style filmmaking, as well as podcasting and all those kind of new media bits that form part of the journalism sphere, if you like.
Okay, no, that's interesting. And I know that you have a background in, podcasting and that kind of thing. So could you just explain to people listening that won't know who you are, kind of where your background is in that and sort of how you got started?
So my media background is, and kind of journalism background is varied. So back in 2011, I started filming Salisbury City games for the football club, and ran what was called White's TV at the time. We had a very large audience with that and reached around 60,000 people over the season, and drove lots of traffic to the website. And from that, I've kind of expanded. I then went and did some work with AFC Tottenham, where we set up a football commentary service for them live over the internet. And I also ran their website, which got me interested in journalism. After all of that, I kind of gave up work, went away in my mid-30s and did a degree in broadcast media production with a slant towards journalism. I worked for a company called XL Broadcast up in the Northeast, where we produced a TV program for the local TV channel. And from that also, I ended up commentating for both Middlesbrough Football Club and the FA for blind and partially sighted supporters. And I've always had a slight interest in journalism, and now kind of putting two and two together with the podcast thing. I've been making podcasts for companies for 2 or 3 years, and now want to kind of help other people learn this. Is still a relatively new medium, podcasting, although it's been around for 5 or 6 years in the mainstream. Lots of people are coming to it now, and I think it's kind of diverging with radio a bit, which is my other passion. And I think the future of radio is kind of a merge between podcasting and radio. In fact, there is a radio station now broadcasting on DAB in London, which is just made up of podcast content. But podcast is like radio. It's a really intimate medium. You can take it anywhere. So unlike video content and other forms, it's really easy to take with you. So you can listen to it on the train, you can listen to it on a flight, you can listen to it when you're driving. It's kind of a bit like radio. It's the medium that you can take everywhere. So that's podcasting really is exciting for me.
No, absolutely. I think podcasting is an interesting dynamic personally for me anyway, to do stuff which could suit video but doesn't necessarily suit video all the time. That makes sense.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Because all interviews suit podcast, but not all interviews require video content. Because if it's just two people chatting like we are now, you don't really need to see that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think in some ways it gives a different perspective, because especially as someone who is on camera a lot, talking myself personally, people know what I look like and how I act
Yeah.
on camera anyway. So it's not like if you wanted to watch my video content, then go watch my video content, right? But with the podcast, I can sort of not have to, I guess the term is like care as much about like the aesthetics of the shot, right?
Yes.
I can just focus on the content that we're discussing, or the content or the topic or whatever it may be.
That's right.
You know, in that respect.
And it's proven that people listen more to audio only content than they do with video because they get distracted when they're watching video.
Yeah, I think you
So
can
it's-
have
so it can have more impact if you like.
Yeah, I think you can. I think in some ways it depends on how you do the video, but there's a lot more work in having a high retention rate video than there is podcast, for example.
Yeah.
Just simply because you need to hook their visual attention, but also audio attention. And with podcasts, like people, I think in most cases like to put them on when they're doing something monotonous, like doing the dishes or cleaning the house or driving commute or whatever. In that respect. So I think that's very interesting. But also for me, I think it's important to kind of diversify, especially nowadays, to diversify what you can offer to firstly clients, but also, as a media person myself, I think it's important to show your other skill sets where they may lie, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that definitely does.
And I also think that it's, it gives you another avenue to kind of try new things that you otherwise wouldn't necessarily, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
So, okay, no, that's cool. So I think moving back to My Salisbury a little bit, like I know you run a podcast with My Salisbury. How was that experience starting? I think you're on, at the time of filming, I think episode 4, episode 5?
We've just released episode 5, so we've had some really interesting characters from around Salisbury come forward to be part of the My Salisbury podcast. And the aim of the podcast was to kind of have some content for the platform when it went live, because I wanted to show people what we can do. So we've got some written content. You've kindly given us some video content, and also some audio content. So I wanted to have some content on the platform for launch, so we can say this is our aim. We want to teach you how to do all these things. And also, I like talking about Salisbury. I'm from here. I was born here. I've moved away a couple of times and always come back. And I'm very passionate about my home city. So I wanted to talk to people who are also passionate about Salisbury. So we've talked to Kerry Herford-Jones, who's the ex-MD of X-spireFM, and is also a lay canon of the cathedral. We've talked to Liam McConnell, who runs a recruitment company in Salisbury. We've talked to Frog Moody. That's the latest episode while we're recording this, went out today on the 31st of August. He's a local historian, really interested in music, and also a city councillor. And tomorrow I'm recording a podcast with our former MP, Robert Key. And his past with Salisbury, served for many years as a Salisbury MP, but also went to school here and has lived here for the majority of his life. So lots of interesting, different people from different backgrounds, and a few more coming too. I think we'll have probably 10 for the first series of that.
Okay. So I think it'd be interesting for me to hear, but also for people who tune into my podcast specifically, to hear kind of how you sort of found me. I guess I'll use the term, like how you sort of stumbled upon me, or how you were your first introducing to me and what I do.
So social media, I follow lots of local businesses on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, and your videos appeared because you were doing things throughout the fun that we've had of lockdown, of when business have relaunched, but also of Salisbury being empty, which is quite an eerie. I'm quite used to seeing Salisbury empty at 4 a.m. in the morning when it's dark. Not so used to seeing Salisbury in the middle of the day when it's bright and sunny and there's absolutely nobody there. And that kind of really captured my imagination. And so I started following you, and then we got talking.
No, absolutely. I think, I mean, for me, the reason why I asked that is because it's always interesting for me to know kind of what the initial hook is, or whether it's a, kind of trickle down effect of like just constantly seeing my name in some ways as well. Because I think for me, because I get this question a lot of like, oh, how do you like generate new interest or whatever, right, in what you're doing?
Yeah.
And I think in reality, it's a mix of the both. I think it's about sort of doing something different, but also doing it consistently.
Yes.
As well, I think consistency is the main thing. Have you found in your career and with My Salisbury that obviously my source is quite young, so it may be hard to tell
Yeah.
specifically whether the
Certainly with
consistency is going
certainly
to
with
help.
other content, if you do it at the same time every week. So when I used to produce the highlights for Salisbury, they would always be online by Monday morning. So people were ready, because I'm sure I'm not alone in this. First thing on a Monday morning, most people read through their emails, and then by about 10 or 11 o'clock, they're done from reading their emails and they need a bit of a break. So they'll go online and have a 5-minute break. And that might be to just scroll through their Facebook feed on their phone while they have a cup of coffee, or it might be, if they're a football fan, they want to go and watch some highlights. So if your highlights were there either Sunday night or Monday morning, ready for people to watch on their first coffee break when they're at work on Monday morning, then they knew that that would be there every week. And then you get more and more people coming back every week. And I could see, because YouTube's wonderful like that, you can see when people are watching. And between 10 a.m. and 12 a.m. or 12 midday, sorry, on a Monday morning is when I got most of the views for the football highlights. So it was very clear to me that if I kept putting them up on a Monday morning, or by Monday morning at 9 a.m., that's when I was going to. But if I slipped to a Tuesday, then I would get less views, and I get less shares, and it's kind of a snowball effect. So social media is wonderful, because if someone likes what you're doing, they'll either like it or share it or retweet it or whatever. So the more people that you get into a routine of watching or enjoying your content, the more people are going to like and share and comment and retweet, and it snowballs, and eventually you end up with a large audience. As long as you're doing it right and you're consistently producing high quality content and different content too. If you did the same thing every week, people will get bored. So you need to innovate all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's about learning what your, I'll use the term quote unquote, audience enjoys, but also
Yes.
then kind of pushing the boundaries on what is possible and what is possible to do, but then is also how can you add value to that person listening, because they're giving you your time, like their time at the end of the day, and how can you make their that exchange of time valuable to them, right? Is it going to be like, is it entertaining, or is it can I learn something, or is actually in that respect, I think that's really, really important. I think that's where some other creators or some other people who may be starting out kind of in some ways could be doing better, if that makes sense.
So I think all content needs to both educate and entertain.
Mm-hmm.
If we take this back to the longest kind of running tropes on both radio and TV, the most common thing that keeps reoccurring on both is a quiz. So a quiz show on TV or a quiz competition on the radio both informs, educates, and entertains. And also, if you also look at TV and radio, BBC have had a quiz show on at 5:15 on a weekday for years. And everyone knows if you tune into BBC One at 5:15 on a weekday, you're going to get a quiz. Same with a radio breakfast show. People mark their morning. They know what they should be doing by what content's being played out on the radio. So when it was Chris Evans on Radio 2, and he still does it on Virgin, if you're hearing, how do you like your eggs in the morning? You know it's about 8:10. If he's doing another feature, or if it's Ken Bruce doing Popmaster, you know that it's 10:30. And people like that in their life. They like to be able to run their lives by a schedule, and media fits into that too. And it can be really powerful if you're doing the right media at the right time for the right people, and you get your audience right. But you need to keep pushing the boundaries and experiment. Some things don't work, and you kind of got to rein it back in and then go down a different avenue. But if you don't keep experimenting, it becomes stale, and you'll lose your audience eventually.
No, absolutely. But I also think that, if you don't push those boundaries or don't kind of test what works, you'll never know what will or won't. So
certainly.
So I think it's important to not be scared to try. I think is the main thing.
If you don't try things, you're never going to know if they work. Sometimes you try something and you get a really bad reaction to it. So you either tweak it and try it a different way, or you bin it completely and go and try something different. And that's what's really exciting about working in the creative sphere, is being able to experiment. And people are often quite forgiving, and they'll give you, the majority of people will give you nice constructive feedback about when it doesn't work and why it didn't work, especially between creatives, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's very true. But I think a lot of people in some ways have a kind of boundary to wanting to push because they get something that works and they're like, right, okay, this
Yeah.
works, cool. Let's do loads and loads and loads of this. But the thing is that I found anyway is, yeah, it's great to have something that works, but it won't necessarily work if you duplicate that by 10 times.
Yeah, and it also might not work for different clients.
Yeah.
So I see lots of media creators who, and this goes for website producers, it goes for video content creators, it goes for social media consultants or whatever they like to call themselves. And you see their work across different clients, and it's almost identical. And you're like, well, one size doesn't fit all, and one size doesn't fit all platforms either. So a video that might work really well on Twitter might not work really well on Facebook because they're different platforms and you need to have slightly different content to work with the context that they're sat in. And yeah, there are really lazy people, but I tend not to talk to them.
No, absolutely. So moving back to my Salisbury specifically, if there was someone
Yeah.
listening who, you know, is interested in hearing more about it, but doesn't, I think the gap is like, what is the goal? In a simple answer, like, what do you want? What do you ideally want to achieve? Like you said earlier, a little bit about
The
like,
goal is to have a platform which represents Salisbury as a community, and that means the whole spectrum of the community of Salisbury. So I want people from every walk of life, every religion, every economic background. Doesn't matter if they work in a shop or whether they work high up in some organization with a fancy job title. I want the whole of Salisbury to be represented. And it doesn't matter if you have any experience in anything, as long as you have an imagination, you can be involved. So I want the limit of what my Salisbury produces is to be the limit is the person's imagination. So if what someone wants to make a documentary, we'll facilitate them making a documentary. We're going to have cameras available, lighting available, sound equipment available, and we can. Doesn't matter if you know how to use anything. We will teach you from the ground up how to shoot an interview, how to shoot some what we call B-roll, how to put those things onto an edited piece of editing software, and we'll provide the computers and the software and all those bits and pieces. And it doesn't cost anyone anything. Is the best thing. So to be involved, it's free. The workshops are free. And I'm building this network of people who are alongside me going to teach the skills of how to make all of this content. We've got journalists who've written for national publications who are going to help with writing for journalism. We've got an owner of a PR company who's going to help with media law. We've got people who, like yourself, create media content who are going to help with workshops on different shooting styles, different editing styles, and all those little things. But we'll start with the baby building blocks of how to do things, and then where you want to go with your imagination, we'll find the people, or we'll have the skills already within our little team of how to teach you how to do that. So no one should be intimidated, and it's open to everyone. Anyone who is aged 19 and over, or who is legally an adult, so 18 and over, can get involved. And there is another project for 13 to 19-year-olds coming, but that's COVID permitting, when we can do our kind of after school club thing, which we're going to aim at 13 to 19-year-olds.
Mm-hmm. Okay, no, that's interesting. I think that's going to be really positive for, like, firstly the city, but also then for young people, because there's a lot of talk at the moment, or there was before COVID anyway, about young people have nothing to do, yada 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 yada.
So in Salisbury, we're really lucky because we got the guys up at the Sound Emporium and who up at the Bunker, who do fantastic things. But they're very music orientated. So if you're not interested in music, you're a bit limited in Salisbury with what you're going to do. So and lots of kids now have a smartphone. They've started making video for TikTok or YouTube or wherever else, who want to learn that next level of skill. So they currently don't edit their content. They just film it live and they trim the ends off and chuck it on TikTok or YouTube or wherever. We want to teach them that next level of skill. So teach them about using prime lenses on cameras, how to edit, how to film with your edit in mind, rather than just filming something and kind of trying to make it work in an edit. You plan your shots, you have a shot list, you kind of build it from scratch with a script, because everything that you film has some form of script. That might just be I'm going to have some B-roll. Then there's going to be an interview interspersed with some B-roll and then some B-roll at the end. Or it might be more detailed that you say, well, I'm going to have a shot of this. It's going to transition to a shot of that. And then you have a more detailed script and shot list. So yeah, all those skills, from shooting an interview to doing a live multi-camera studio to doing stop motion animation, all those things that we'll want to teach kids specifically, but also if adults want to do that, we'll teach them how to do that as well.
Have you found, like, because I know a lot of people ask me all the time, oh, I'm in my 30s or I'm in my 40s or whatever, is it too late for me to change my career path or whatever,
So I worked as a radio and satellite communications engineer, and then as an IT and electronics engineer from the age of 19 to the age of 36. So a good half of my working life I've spent working in electronics and communications. At the age of 36, well, I started hobbying in my late 20s, but never saw a career path. And then someone gave me a bit of a boot up the bottom and said, "You're really quite good at this. Why don't you go and do this for a living?" And I said, "Well, it's quite hard." And I kind of regret, because I joined the army when I was 19, 20, and kind of regretted not going to university. So I went off to university and got my degree, and graduated at the age of 40. So if I can go and do that, then it's never too late for anyone. I know of people in their 60s who've just gone and embarked on a university degree for the first time. And there's people who are going to be involved in this project who are retired. There's people in their 30s and there's people in their 40s and 50s, but there's also people in their 20s. So and I want all of those people, because everyone has a story to tell. And everyone has a spark of creativity inside them. They might just not have realized it yet.
Yeah, or might not necessarily been given the opportunity
yeah.
or the kind of building blocks to say, well, this is what is possible, right? Like
That's
how
right.
you think about something, or etc.
And I think it's important to add, we're not going to try and teach anyone to write English, because that's not what we're about. So don't feel like we're going to judge your standard of English or your literacy or anything like that. As long as you can put a coherent sentence together or speak in a coherent way, then you'll be fine. Because I can't write in a coherent way. My English is terrible, and I'm the son of a head teacher, so I shouldn't really admit to that.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that's interesting to hear, because, for me, written has always been something which I've found more challenging than everything else. Right?
Yeah.
And for me, I kind of have found this kind of funny way to, in some ways, pivot what I'm doing. So, instead of writing a blog about something, I'll do a podcast about it, or I'll do a video about it, or whatever. So I can still get the the feedback of actually producing the content and actually creating the content, but without having the kind of hurdles that I feel are hurdles in the respect to, like, oh great, I need to write this thing, and I'm gonna then critique all my grammar and yada yada yada, and I think that kind of seeing in some ways how some people kind of pivot has been very interesting for me. Have you seen, or like, mainly talking media wise, but have you seen kind of when the lockdown happened, how media companies or etc. have kind of pivoted to have to, like, evolve or change what they've been doing? Or
I think there's loads of great examples of how people have changed their offering of what they're doing. Advertising companies all very quickly jumped on the bandwagon of replicating Zoom video calls within their adverts. TV programs switched to being done remotely. So Ramesh Ranganathan did his Nation, where everyone was on a Zoom call, and then they had a couple of celebrities via another link, and he did it from his garage. Steph McGovern took her show live early on Channel 4. So she wasn't due to start broadcasting until the autumn, but went live during the summer, live from her own living room. Loads of professional level companies have done things, but also local level companies. So my wife and I sat in our kitchen every Saturday night for 7 weeks, and we ran a pub quiz from our kitchen using some of the kit that I've got here that will be used with my Salisbury. And we just put on a quiz that ran for a couple of hours every Saturday night for 7 weeks, and we grew quite a large audience on that, and it was good fun. And I think it's been interesting how people have innovated, and just people who've never used media before became virtual quiz show hosts. They became, you saw people who never would have used social media to produce video content were putting out video content of them dancing with their grandchildren, all sorts of things. And I think it's awoken creativity in people, because we've been forced to kind of go back to the old school of entertaining ourselves. But now we have this modern technology where we can share our entertaining of ourselves with other people. And I think that's been really exciting and interesting.
No, absolutely. I mean, for me, it's been interesting to see as things have started to open up, who has kind of kept with it, right?
Yeah.
That obviously had that spark when lockdown happened. They were forced into a situation and they were like, okay, I'm going to create for TikTok, or I'm going to create for this or that, you know. But then they're like, wait, hold on, there might be something here.
Yeah.
And I think that from, sorry, go on.
So I think there's two types of people: the people who do it professionally and kind of innovated during lockdown and then have stopped because their normal business has picked back up, and I think that's fair enough. But then I think you've got the other sort of people who just did it for a bit of fun and have accidentally hit on an absolute gold seam of how to entertain people, and they're still loving doing it. They're still getting lots of views, and they're still creating their content. And I think that's and I think these people might start appearing in other, or at least their ideas will start appearing in more mainstream media. And I think that's really exciting. Social media originally was supposed to democratize media, and I think that it was kind of losing its way a little bit, and then lockdowns kind of reset it in a way, and people have found their voice, not always in constructive ways, as is the way with social media. But I think for a large portion of people, they've gone, well, social media is allowing me to connect with people again, whereas we can't go and physically connect with them, but it's allowing me to connect with them. And so that joker who sits in the pub and makes everybody laugh, he now makes TikTok videos, or he runs a thread of jokes on Twitter or whatever he does. So he's had to find a new outlet for making people laugh. Or you have the woman who used to go and sing in the market square for fun on a weekend. Every town centre's got one of these people who just turns up and sings or does whatever they do, be it a busker formally, or they just turn up and start singing randomly in different places. They now have found out that they can just film themselves on their smartphone, and they can either do it live on Facebook, or they can do it recorded and post it across everywhere. And I think it's really nice that people have found different ways of connecting, as opposed to the traditional ways of connecting where we sit opposite each other and connect.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it will only open up more opportunities for people who, otherwise couldn't connect, whether that's geolocated or etc., are then able to connect. What would you say to people who, because I think there's going to be a certain set of people who be like, oh no, that's going to go away, or oh no, I don't want to do that, or oh no, that couldn't possibly work in regards to like video or content or whatever. What kind of would you say to those? I guess the question there is like, what would you say to the people who either haven't given it enough chance to work in the respect to, oh, I put videos out, yada yada yada, but I'm not seeing a return on my time, like because either they're not getting the views, etc., or they're not getting the interest in it.
I think the first thing you got to get straight is you're not going to have an audience like Joe Wicks after 1 week. Joe Wicks has been doing what he does for years, and he started with an audience of 5 or 6 viewers on his first videos, but he kept plugging away and he kept doing the right things, and he learned what worked. Firstly, if you're not enjoying it, don't do it, because if you're not enjoying it, the people who are consuming your media content aren't going to enjoy it. If you love what you're doing and you're getting a few views, try and talk to your audience. An audience of 10 to 50 people are far more responsive in a positive way than an audience of 1 million people are. So talk to them. You will almost know these people by name, because I suspect most of them will be friends and family to begin with. So ask them what they like, what they don't like, and then refine what you're doing. And if you're still really enjoying it, just keep doing it. And if you're doing it right, the audience will grow gradually. But you don't go from starting your YouTube channel, which is I think people think that you start a YouTube channel and then millions of people are going to watch what you're doing. It doesn't work like that. You need to work tirelessly and you need to refine what you're doing, and you'll get better at what you're doing. And then eventually, if you keep doing it and you keep loving it and you keep enjoying it and it entertains you, you've got a chance that you might grow an audience. You could be the best person. You could be the next Dermot O'Leary sat in your bedroom making little videos. But if you're not in, and you might have the talent and you might have all the skills that are required to make engaging content, but you need luck too. You absolutely need a bit of luck. You need the right person who's already got a large following to retweet you or share your content. And then it grows exponentially fast because their audience will then become your audience. And you kind of need that little bit of luck where the right person shares your content at the right time. Otherwise, it's a real slog and it will take you 5 or 6 years, and you might get to numbers with 4 or 5 digits. Or you need to connect yourself with someone famous. I went to a seminar once about podcasts, and I don't know if you've heard of Atletico Mints, but it's a podcast by 2 guys. One of them is Bob Mortimer. So we had a talk from the guy who makes it with him, whose name now escapes me because he's not famous at all, apart from Atletico Mints. And he said, and one person asked him for his advice, how do you make a podcast that gets consumed by a lot of people? And his advice was, find someone famous to do it with. and that does, it speeds everything up. If you've got a famous voice, a famous face, or a famous name associated with your content, more people will consume it.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. Or you just need to pick the right people who are influential in the field that you're talking about. So if you're talking about media and journalism, if you can find on a local level someone who's into media and journalism to talk about, then both your audiences are going to be interested in that. And again, that will grow. And then as you build your reputation, you'll be able to pull in better known people and more widely known and respected people. And then you'll grow it like that. Or you just need to be really funny or really talented.
Or really or really dedicated, I think.
Really dedicated too, but if you haven't got a talent, your audience will quickly wane. Because there's so much choice, and they'll just move on to someone who's slightly more funny than you, slightly more talented than you, and that's kind of the nature of the beast. And it's and everyone says that because we're essentially talking about showbiz here now, and showbiz is a really hard, harsh world.
Yeah.
So you've got to be able to take criticism, and you also need to be ready for it to all disappear in an instant.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter how good you are or how big your audience is, if you do something wrong, or you don't do something right for a short while, they'll go and watch something else because there's so much choice.
Mm-hmm. No, that's true, but I also don't think it should discourage people who
No, certainly shouldn't. It's a when you see people listening to or watching your content, there's a buzz about it.
Yeah. And
it strokes your ego, and that's one of the nicest feelings in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And especially when you then I'll give an example, I get noticed or recognised in Salisbury quite a lot nowadays, and that's a nice feeling.
I recognised you on the train the other day, and we've never met in person, but I recognised you on the train the other day. So
yeah. So this is the key example of it. It's just if you're consistent and I would hope that the content I make is in somewhat entertaining or somewhat somewhat talented. I find it difficult to say that personally.
And so you always should feel like that. I don't think if you ever feel like you're kind of
I'm the shit.
Article, then it's time to give up.
Yeah.
Because if you're not learning, you're not innovating, you're not trying to do new things, or if you see say in your line of work, if you see something on a video on someone else's channel, you go, oh, I wish I could do that, and then I suspect you spend the next few days or weeks learning how to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Or there's a certain style which I'm right now I don't have the capability to do that. For example, I don't have a studio space, so I can't do a lot of studio commercial stuff, right? But
yeah.
Also, then I'm right, okay, so what steps do I need to put in place to then be to the point where I can have somewhat of a studio space, so then I can be in a situation where I can have a space that I can then learn that craft, right? So it's more, what can I learn today than what can I learn in a year, right? and sort of understanding where you are, but also then understanding that the skills you learn today are also going to serve you for the rest of the time you do it. And I think that's really important, because I think a lot of people kind of get, we talked about, doing the same thing over and over again. I think they also get comfortable in, okay,
Yes.
cool, I can do this. This doesn't scare me or challenge me anymore, so I'm going to do this because it's easy, right? And it's comfortable. But something which I have tried to do for the last couple of years is, when something terrifies me, right, like actually terrifies me to do, or this is working with a new client or etc., I do it anyway, because I find that that's the times where you push, that's the times where you truly learn, that's the times where you really grow, and also that's the times where you're able to be in a situation where you can look back on, say, a year ago and say, I had no idea I was going to be where I am now, and that's very exciting, personally.
Yeah, and I think you need the confidence, or even a faux confidence, that when a client says, "Can you do this for me?" you go, "Yeah, of course I can." And then you spend the time between saying, "Yes, of course I can," and the time that you go and do it for them, learning how to do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't believe anyone who says that they've never ever said yes to a client not knowing how to do it. I think everyone has always said, "Yeah, I can do that."
Yeah.
And then panicked when they've left the meeting and gone, "I'm going to learn how to do that really quickly."
Okay, right. So now I need to learn After Effects in 5 minutes. Fabulous.
Exactly. Yeah. Which you can't even learn how to make a new composition in After Effects in 5 minutes.
No, you can't. But
let alone make the rain fall when there hasn't been rain.
Yeah, that's it gets very complex very quick. But
I
yeah,
love After Effects though.
After Effects is brilliant. But I think it's one of those things where, especially if you, like anything, if you go into it feeling slightly uncomfortable, but also then being honest and kind of transparent with, for example, whenever I go into a video project, I always say, I have no idea how this video project is actually going to end. We'll make sure we hit the message and we make sure we hit the goal, of course, but I actually, the project itself will evolve since conception. So I always like to plan in.
Clients have unrealistic expectations sometimes, so they're wanting a video like the Citroen robot advert from about 10-15 years ago, and they have a budget of £1,000.
Yeah.
Because they see people do it on YouTube, they think that it's really easy and you can get that for £1,000.
Yeah.
No.
But yeah, exactly. I mean, but also I think it's part of your job. I mean, mainly talking as a videographer here, but
to
I'm
manage
sure.
Expectations,
yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Manage expectations. So I've had people come to me about podcasts, and essentially what they want me to make is a radio advert for them. So that's not really what I do. I don't really make 30-second bits of content. That's a very different thing. And also, if you put out a 30-second bit of content on your social media, you're better off paying for a radio advert.
Yeah.
You probably spend the same amount of money and get a much larger audience and impact. Because if you've got 50 followers on your Twitter account and you're putting out a 30-second advert, if you're not paying to promote it, that's pointless.
Mm-hmm.
So you might as well pay the money you're going to pay to promote it to your local radio company.
Yeah, I think
that's how 30-second and then that gets played 10 times a day, and then it's stuck in people's head by the end of the week. If you put it onto Twitter, they're going to watch it or listen to it once, and then you're kind of done, and you've spent the same amount of money.
I think there's an argument
for a radio.
I think there's an argument to be made, for organic, like the argument there is is it an advertisement or is it organic content? I think there's an argument for both, and I think, if I'm honest, businesses now have to be doing both to be successful. Of course, you can get away with not doing it, but the concept of we can just ignore social media as a thing to market on is not a thing you can do now, because that is where the attention is.
Well, first things first, how many times have you seen on Facebook and someone says, "Can someone recommend X service to me?"
Yeah.
And if you're not taggable on Facebook, it makes it really hard for people to find you. And people are lazy. People are very lazy.
Mm-hmm.
So if you put a post saying, "Can you recommend a mechanic to me?" and someone tags you as a mechanic, they're more likely to click your link than one that says, "Oh, Joe Blogs down where's it is really good." You're not going to look up. You're not going to go Google Joe Blogs down where's it. You're going to click on the link that's just below it or above it because it's easier.
Yeah, or
So
you're
you
just
need to have a
gonna,
social media presence.
yeah, exactly. Or you're just gonna go to the Facebook page, or you're gonna go to the Facebook person, and then just
Well, yeah,
message
because you're
them.
already on Facebook.
Right.
So why are you going to go
Yeah,
anywhere
exactly.
else?
You're literally just gonna write a message and go, right, that's handled. Right, what's the next problem I need to deal with today?
Exactly.
You
People are
know,
lazy. You need to approach them in as many ways as possible.
I think
And you need to be clever about the ways that you approach people on different platforms. So you might have the same message, but you might do it in 4 different ways across Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn.
Yeah, absolutely. Because they're different platforms that should tailor to different people. For example,
Exactly.
LinkedIn is more professional.
Supposedly.
Well, supposedly.
Yeah.
Yeah, everyone's had those more personal. I think there's definitely a benefit in being slightly more personal, but also
Yeah.
understanding where the line is, right? Like understanding that it's still a professional platform for professionals, I think is the point. And I think you can be personal but also being professional at the same way.
Yeah. So I've seen it was quite a clip and it went viral. It was a Northeastern company that did this. They posted a video which was about 30 seconds long, and the first 10 seconds of it was pictures of cute cats.
Right.
They were selling a mechanics business, but they were wanting to appeal to a female audience. So they got lots of women sharing their video because it started with videos of cats, and their strapline was this, and their kind of message was, "This isn't really about cats, but we wanted to talk to you." And they understood, and it was quite a brave way to go. But they understood their video would get shared because it had cats on the front of it, even though they were selling a mechanic service. And it worked. They had hundreds of thousands of views on their content. And whether that converted into people using their garage to get their car fixed, I don't know. But to get 100,000 views on a Facebook post from a local company is fairly good going, and it wouldn't have cost them a huge amount of money.
Yeah.
Just because they knew that but that wouldn't work on LinkedIn at all.
Yeah,
and it probably wouldn't work as well on Twitter. But on Facebook, people share videos of cats.
No, absolutely. But again, it's like tailoring it to the platform and understanding who is on the platform on average. Of course, there's outcroppers, of course, etc. But who is the average demographic of that platform, right? But then you have a marketing conversation of like, if you have a marketing person, they should already know this answer. But one of the first questions I ask a client is, who are we targeting? Like, who is your ideal audience to this piece of content? Because that will change everything about the content. Right, like if we're targeting a younger audience, we'll shoot it a very specific way, or we'll annotate it a very specific way, or we'll
and
try
the
and do
worst
it a very
answer you
specific
can
way.
get is everyone.
I want everything. No,
you
no,
can't
you
have
don't.
it.
No, you don't. Or you also don't want everyone.
No, you don't.
Because they're not. You need to understand as a business, and something which I realized very early on, that you need to understand who is actually going to buy your service or product. Right.
That's right. And unless you're Tesco's or Sainsbury's or one of the other large supermarkets who do generally want to talk to everyone.
Yeah.
But their marketing will generally talk
but
to
even
middle-aged women.
But yeah, even then they don't want to talk to everyone.
No. And their marketing is aimed at middle-aged women. So if you're in the age bracket of 35 to 55 and you're female, Tesco's are trying to talk to you.
Because even if Tesco's and Waitrose, they all target different, like even economic brackets, right? So again, even then, yes, everyone has to eat. Yes, everyone has to buy food, but they're still going to target a specific demographic to market to, because they're more likely to go there than they are like, I arguably would say middle class people are more likely to go to Waitrose than they are to Tesco's, right?
Yeah, well, that's their target market. But if they are probably the only companies in this world who could probably answer, everyone. I want to target everyone. Yeah. If you're running a business that's not a supermarket, you're talking to very specific people, and all decent companies should work with you and build a persona of the person or people that you want to talk to. Because then you can understand. You can decide which newspapers they read, or even if they read a newspaper these days, which radio station they're more likely to listen to, what TV shows they're more likely to watch. And then you can take bits and pieces out of their lives and then decide what interests them. And then you can talk to them on that level.
Yeah.
And that's what lots of people miss when they're deciding to create content to promote themselves. You need to talk to a very specific audience. And when you say a specific audience, there's 68 million people who live in this country. 40 odd million of those are in the working age range. Mm-hmm. So even if you're only talking to say 10% of that 40 million people on a national level, that's a huge audience.
Yeah,
But as soon as you say you're only wanting to talk to 5 to 7%, 10% of the audience, they go, oh, well, what's the point? That's hardly anyone. But it's not. It's a huge amount of people.
Yeah, and also if you're talking like conversion, then you can really iron down what your conversion strategy is, and then also understand how that conversion strategy is valuable to the consumer, which is at the end of the day the only thing that matters.
Yeah.
And also then you can realize, like, if we have a 4 or 5% conversion, right, but it's targeted specifically at those people, you can probably then get, instead of targeting everyone where you get maybe a 3-4% conversion, targeting it very specifically towards the people who you already know are going to like your service or already are in need of your service, then you'll have probably closer to a 20 to 30% conversion at the start, right?
Yeah.
Because you're talking to the people who already need the service you offer.
So in theory, the better targeted your advert is at a specific group, the higher your conversion rate will be.
Yeah.
So in theory, you'll spend less pounds per person that you have contacting you about your service.
Yep.
In theory. Obviously, it doesn't always work like that, but
no, of course. But
in an ideal world, it would.
But also the thing that a lot of people kind of in some ways don't understand, I think, about advertising that's quite common is that advertising takes a lot of time to actually get to the point where you know who and what you're marketing to.
Yes.
Right? Like, I can sit here and tell you, okay, we could do a promotional video, but I also am going to guarantee you'll get some slight hit traction on that promotional video, but you will not make money from it.
No.
Right?
Yeah,
you'll get brand awareness from it.
Yeah, you'll make people aware of who you are, hopefully. The one of the most so when Chris Moyles was on Radio 1's breakfast show, almost 3 or 4 times an hour, they would mention that if you were interested in finding out more about anything, you had to go to the Radio 1 website.
Mm-hmm.
When Radio 1 did a survey of their listeners, 40% of people who listened to Radio 1 weren't aware that there was a website. So you can bang on about something as much as possible and tell people about as much as possible. They know your brand exists, but they don't really know what you do.
Yeah.
And if the BBC can't tell its listeners that it's got a website specific to that radio station, and 40% don't appreciate there's a website connected to Radio 1 specifically, then that just shows you how hard it is to get a message across in a short space of time.
So, and I think there's this, as I say, I think there's a misconception with, especially when I take on new clients, that they're expecting me to come in and go, right, here's every marketing solution you ever needed in your entire life.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, okay, step back for a sec. Yes, we'll get there, but right now we need to understand, what do you want to achieve in the next 3 months, not what do you want to achieve in the next year, right? Or etc. In that respect. So I think it's important for people who are starting now, like now more than ever, is like where I would say you should be looking if your marketing is not actually making you money. And I know this is contradictory to what I just said, but if your marketing is actually not helping your business, then you need to do something else, right? Yeah. Because now more than ever is very important to understand that the money you're spending on something is actually justifiable in the respect to it actually serves a purpose. Right now, that purpose might take 3, 4, 5, 6 months to actually be there. That's unfortunately something that happens in life, right? And in anything, right? It's like, it's like fitness. You don't go to a gym, right? Or maybe not go to a gym nowadays, but you know what I mean? You don't start working out and then suddenly decide the next day, oh, I'm magically going to be buff. No, it takes time, right? It takes consistency in that respect as well. I think it's, and I think there's in some ways a misconception around content specifically, about how it helps market or how it helps a business in some ways as well.
Now, do you think that's because people come as a last resort? They're kind of like, they've tried lots of other things themselves, and when they're coming to you or whoever they're asking to help promote them, is kind of,
I think it's
they've already pulled their hair out and they're kind of
unfortunately
at the end of their tether
think
with it, and they're and they almost need it to have instant results.
I think it's a mix of both. I think unfortunately, I have a couple of clients in mind for this, and I think it's one of those things where because they haven't, I guess in some ways they haven't all in on one specific style of marketing or one specific thing that works. They don't know how well it could do, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, like, as I say, I can do 1 or 2 videos for you, but I'll guarantee you might get some, oh, that's a really cool video, but that's not going to actually help your bottom line. What will help your bottom line is me building an organic set of content that goes out regularly, like, once, twice a week, whatever it is, and doing that for 3 months. That will help your bottom line, right?
Yeah. You got it's back to that consistency thing. You need to have a consistent message being put out consistently over a longer period of time. Otherwise, you might as well just throw your money in the bin.
Exactly, and that's my, I think there's always going to be a point for billboard advertising and print advertising, but they're more targeted towards, hey, we've got this specific offer on right now, and not building a longer term relationship with your client base or customer base.
But they also work because you're going back to consistency. So if you chuck a billboard up on a roundabout, the same people drive past that roundabout. The majority of the traffic that goes past that will drive past there every day, and they'll see your billboard every day, and eventually they'll recognize your brand. And eventually, when they need a service that's connected to your brand, they'll think of you. And the same goes with newspaper advertising. If you put a paper in, an advert in the daily paper every day for a month, eventually people will start recognizing, seeing the advert, seeing your brand, and knowing what you're doing. And so, although you can have more instant impact with that sort of advert, the same is true that if it's there consistently, people will become recognize your brand, associate it with another brand that they're already in, especially with newspapers. People are very loyal with newspapers. So if you advertise consistently in the same newspaper, because that's deemed to be your target market, then you become a recognizable brand and associated with a brand they trust. And that's really important.
No, that's true. No, that's very true. But I think it's also about, so for example, you have a certain messaging on a billboard, you have certain messaging in paper advertising, but then you should also be doing where the attention is as well, which is like, I'll give you an example. If I'm going to buy something, right, I might see a billboard of it being talked about. I then might go on Facebook and see the same company talking about the similar message or whatever on Facebook as well, and then I'm more likely to buy because they're I'm seeing them more often, so it means they're more frequently in my mind, which I think is why people can't nowadays. They should be talking about doing different levels of marketing, as in like multi-level marketing in some ways, because I think it's the most important way to do it. But also, like, if you have, like, obviously there's going to be a budget conversation at some point, but a common misconception with video specifically is, oh, this is going to cost me thousands and thousands of pounds to do, right? Now, yes, if you want a high-end commercial, it's going to cost you high-end prices, okay? But you can do a lot in the middle ground to still get the point across that doesn't have to cost you the entire planet.
Yeah, and I think people are getting used to what gets called in the media industry fast and dirty. So it's a little bit rough around the edges, but it's instant. So you can have an idea and have a video live in a couple of hours, and that can be just as effective sometimes, if it's done right, as something that's taken a week to shoot and cost you £10,000.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so it's about your audience and matching your audience's expectations. If you're a high-end, very expensive product, you're not going to want something fast and dirty.
No.
But if you're, say, a mechanic, a service that people need on a regular basis, if you do a video that maybe costs you £500 to make, and it's relevant to the time. So lockdown's a really good example for this. So if you are just coming out of, you're just allowed to start running your service again, and you need to promote it quickly, you can shoot a video in an hour and have it online a couple of hours later after someone like yourself has come and shot and edited it and chucked it online for you. That can be just as effective as £10,000 worth of, because you can say, hey, look, I'm open. I've got my first client. Be my next one.
Yeah.
And that can be really powerful.
And I think there's also like a middle ground between everywhere from, this costs 100 quid to this costs 10 grand, right? Like, it's about, like, for me, that's why, like, budget is always an interesting thing for me, because it really depends on how big scale do you want to go, right? Like, we can do a promotional video or we can do a content strategy, right? Obviously, the latter is going to cost you more because there's more of my time and energy going into it, right? But I think that it just depends simply on how are you looking to achieve, like, what are you looking to achieve long term, and are you then going to be able to see, like, do you want an instant turn on investment or not? Because and that's what I mean by like in some ways a promotional video gives you a lot of brand awareness right there and then that may actually net result you in revenue, but from a longer term perspective, in comparison to what you spend, it probably won't, right?
Mm-hmm.
What will most likely actually get you a return on investment is if you'll consistently, say, for example, just picking numbers out of the air, but say, for example, you're putting 500 quid in a month to get some content made for your business, right? Consistently, after 4 months or 5 months, I would probably expect you to at least have broken even on what you've been spending in that content in regards to conversion of whatever the service is, right? I would expect. If you're not, by 6 months to 8 months, then you need to look at what you're doing and why it's not working. Because by that point, you should have gained enough momentum to get to the point where you're at least seeing money, if that makes sense, from the content you're doing.
Yep.
Okay, cool. I think that's kind of everything that I wanted to discuss. I think it kind of went in an interesting development side away from my Salisbury, but I think it was interesting to have that conversation. And I think there's still a lot of value in there. Is there anything that you specifically want to mention?
Salisbury residents, if you want to get involved with My Salisbury, it's just mysalisbury.co.uk, and then there's a get involved page. I think that's probably the easiest way. Or follow us on social media.
And is there anyone specifically that you thinking a little bit further ahead, because by the time this comes out that this will be current, that you will be looking for specifically?
People who run events. So if you run an event in Salisbury and you're just getting started, as COVID restrictions lift, hopefully we'll have more events running in the community. We've got a What's On page or an events page on the website, and we'd love to fill that with your events. And also come and attend your events and take some photos, have a chat with you. And then if you're going to be doing the same thing again and again, we can help promote it just by being at the event and telling people about it after it's happened, so they know more about it for when the next one happens.
No, absolutely. And if anyone wants to hear more from you specifically, how can they find you?
Me more specifically, I don't know. I've not really thought. This isn't really the My Salisbury thing. Really isn't about me. But if you want to listen to my podcast, it's on iTunes and Spotify and the My Salisbury website, and hopefully soon, once Google accepts it, because they're the last ones too. It'll be on Google soon too.
Cool.
So Great. My Salisbury everywhere. Just My Salisbury.
Just My Salisbury. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Come and join. There's lots of content there, and I think it's gonna be, very, very good for the city.
It's got lots of potential and it's exciting.
Absolutely.
Let's see where it will go. But we need volunteers for it to go anywhere.
Yeah. And there needs to be kind of some, I think, community goodwill for it to be able to do what it wants to do. If that makes sense.
Exactly.
I think for me.
Because I think the more people who get involved, the more people will start consuming the content, and it kind of the plan is for me never to spend any money on marketing, for it to kind of just snowball and get a reputation for producing good quality content that's important to the people of Salisbury.
And I think it will. It's just going to take. I think it's just going to take time personally.
Yeah, there's no rush. There's no rush
for that to happen. Everything we've discussed, everything we've discussed today in this podcast anyway has been kind of all about consistency and understanding that. It all takes time, and you need to be patient to actually get to the point where you can, kind of get a reputation, I guess, for whatever it is that you do.
Yeah. So my aim for it is it to be a trusted, authentic voice of the people of Salisbury. And I think if we do that, then people will use the website and they'll consume the content.
Cool. I think that's a great message to end on.
Thank you very much.
So, thanks for coming on. It was great talking to you.
Been a pleasure. Thanks, Carlton.
Thanks so much for coming back and listening to Andy and I's conversation to this week, ladies and gents. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you took something from it. And as I said in the intro, if you would like to take part in anything that Andy's got going on, I'll leave his links in the description down below or in the post if you're over on Facebook. But thank you so much for joining us once again on the podcast. I'll see you next week for a brand new episode where we're going to be talking to a good friend, someone who I met through networking, who is a virtual assistant and some of the things that she does and some of the misconceptions around virtual assistants. But thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful week. I'll see you on Wednesday for a brand new YouTube video. And enjoy the rest of your day or evening or night. And I'll see you very, very soon.